Paul Schaup is widely accepted as the father of Los Altos. As a railroad executive and land developer, he played an important role in the birth of Los Altos. He left his mark on our town in many, many ways. Hello, I'm Nan Geschke, your host of the Los Altos History Show. Our guests tonight are Stevie and John Day. Stevie and John have actually been neighbors of my husband and I and our family for many years, and their home was next to ours on University Avenue. Stevie and John have lived in Los Altos for about 35 years, and they've lived in the home, the Paul Schaup home, for about 27 years, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we know that the home is very important as a piece of classical architecture, but it's also important and has been designated a town landmark because of its association with Paul Schaup. And there's been a lot of sort of misconceptions about Paul Schaup, and I know that you and Stevie John have done some research and have talked to some of the descendants of Paul, and maybe could sort of clear up some of these misconceptions for us tonight. What do you have to share? I know that it's a large, big story, so we won't be able to get over to give us to tell the whole story. But let's just hit the important points.
Well, Paul's a very interesting person. His life and times were very active. It's a Horatio Alger story in the sense that he came literally from paper boy to president of the Southern Pacific. So it was quite a totally involved story. He grew up in San Bernardino, and actually after he finished high school, he went to work at age 17 for the Southern Pacific as a ticket agent. He actually worked for a little while with Santa Fe before that, but as a ticket agent, he showed a lot of skill and apparently attracted a lot of attention. Among his skills, he turns out to be very good at shorthand. He was a stenographer and telegrapher, and
interesting.
Very interesting kind of a person. But after about 5 years down there, he was promoted and moved up to Northern California. And he had they called him ticket agent, assistant ticket agent in San Francisco. And this is our vocabulary today. He was the assistant marketing manager.
Ah, okay.
For the passenger trains, and one particular train. Now, this is at age 22.
Fairly young man.
Indeed. He was the ticket agent, or promoting a particular train they had that went from San Francisco to New Orleans. It was called the Sunset Limited.
I love it.
And the Sunset Limited, they needed more passengers. It was a new train.
A new route, too,
probably. And so they came up with a promotional piece, and they called it Sunset Magazine.
Oh.
And lo and behold, at the age of about 22, Paul started writing articles, and obviously this became what we know today as Sunset Magazine.
It's kind of interesting to know that it started out as a railroad promotional piece, because now we only think of it as a living and design magazine for the West.
Well, he was trying to show all the scenic attractions on the route that would attract readership and get passengers and build up revenue.
Sure.
Well, this attracted a lot of attention, and it was so good that they promoted him and sent him down to San Jose as the freight and passenger agent in San Jose. And he was down there at the age of about, this was about the late 20s. And
His late 20s.
He was 20.
He was
well,
20.
also,
He was
yes.
his late 20s.
But what I'm leading to is that he had met a young woman in San Francisco who was the daughter of a railroad engineer, and her name was Rose Wilson. And eventually he ended up marrying Rose, and they had 3 children. Now,
So she had railroad connections too.
well, her father actually was present in Promontory, Utah at the time they drove the Golden Spike.
Wow, I guess she did.
He was a construction engineer and actually was an advisor in the construction of the cable cars up in San Francisco. But enough of Wilson,
Yeah.
we're talking about the Schaubs.
Shops.
Rose and Paul lived down in San Jose, in the Nagley part of San Jose, which is it's actually between 11th and 17th Street, behind San Jose State. And in that area, and this was this was about 1907. Anyway, in that area, there were a number of houses built by 2 architects, Wolfe and McKinsey. And Wolfe and McKinsey had actually published a book in 1907. They had built hundreds of houses, from Santa Cruz to Palo Alto, all over. And they attracted her attention so that when their 3rd child was born, they decided they needed a new house. So they actually built what is our present house in 1910. And but that's really getting ahead of the story a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he was, I know that he was involved in a land company, correct?
Well, his career actually, see, I skipped over it,
Yeah.
but he was in Oregon for a while as a freight person, and then he was brought back to the Northern California area and became an assistant manager of the what was then called the Pacific Electric Railroad, and it was the metropolitan, interurban, or trolley electric system that included Northern California and subsequently, as you'll learn, Southern California. But at the time, he was in charge of San Jose, Fresno, Stockton, this Oakland area.
So he had a lot of responsibility.
At that time, yes, and he was very much on a fast track, moving through the hierarchy of the railroad. But what's important is that he was the railroad executive in charge of the network in Northern California. And this was actually he was still, I think, in his low 30s at this point. Well, one of the problems was that they had this track, electric track, between what is now South Palo Alto, or they called it Mayfield, and Los Gatos. And the track had been installed somewhere along the way, but there was no station on that track between Mayfield and Los Gatos. And, when you want to build ridership, you've got to have some stations in the middle, some depots.
Does help.
And there was need of a depot, but at the moment there was no location. Well, we don't know all the details, and I should say in the meantime, this started out in 1906 when he was up in San Francisco helping with the earthquake. Actually, he was very much involved in traffic and management from the Southern Pacific's point of view in the restoration of San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake. But about this time, we don't know exactly when they formed this land company, but Paul Schaup and a group of men formed a company, and the first thing they did was they apparently either bought or acquired the rights to buy what was then called the Merriman Ranch. Now, the Merriman Ranch was on the west side of the tracks, and it was what we know today, bounded by El Monte, Foothill Expressway, and over to the creek, actually to Adobe Creek. Now, and apparently there was some part of that ranch that was on the other side of the tracks, but it was a small parcel, relatively. Now, Mrs. Winchester had bought 150 acres, and I don't know when she bought it, but she had bought 150 acres on the other side of the tracks.
And she was Mrs. Merriman's sister.
That's
Yes,
right. The two were
yeah,
sisters.
Sisters, right.
And it may have been that they bought these two ranches so they'd be close together. You know, it makes sense. But nonetheless, this team of people, who I don't think at that time had really called themselves the Los Altos Land Company, but it eventually became the Los Altos Land Company, apparently made a deal with Mrs. Winchester and acquired at least 100 acres. They may have gotten it all, but a big chunk of her land, which is adjacent to the railroad tracks and which is now today downtown Los Altos.
Right. And I think, not to interrupt you, John, but I know that we want to show some slides of how some of those lots were sold. I know that the land company sort of went through a couple of iterations, and we had talked about that in terms of, mortgages being refinanced and so forth.
Well, see, Nan, the key thing was that the depot had to be installed.
Right.
And of course, Mr. Schaup decided where the depots went, and by pure chance, he put it in the middle of his property.
Interesting, huh?
Very interesting.
Yeah. I think we have some slides up on the monitor right now, and this first one is of Paul Schaup and probably a couple of his land company cohorts, looking at probably a subdivision plot map, and that was where they actually sold lots, and there was actually nothing on the property on Main Street. This is a slide of a barbecue that was held in 1908 when the first railroad actually came down through here. Steam engine came down through Los Altos, and this is another shot of that day, and says we are Los Altos. So there were a lot of promotional tours down into this area by Paul Schaup and land developers, and this was one of the buildings that he built on Main Street. It's now the Eureka Bank, but it was a Robinson's grocery store, and above was once used as the first grammar school and then became the Boy Scout Hall. Anyway, I know that we've talked a little bit now about Paul and about his beginning career, and I know that we could say a whole lot more. But Rose, I know, was a very important person as well in the community, because Paul more or less just lived in Los Angeles. I know we talked about this earlier, that he was
actually 1 year after he built the house.
He was promoted, correct?
He got promoted, and at the age of 38 he was the youngest president of any railroad in the United States.
Isn't that incredible? Right.
And this was it was, quote, $100 million railroad. It was the Pacific Electric Railroad, headquartered in Los Angeles. Now, he was responsible for all of the railroads in Northern California, but also the elaborate interurban system that was in Los Angeles. And actually, so he in effect had moved away, although Rose remained in Northern California and in fact lived in the house.
Right. Stevie, tell us a little bit about Rose, because I think she's kind of
I think Rose was the original single mother. I mean, he was in LA, and she was very much a part of the community. She raised her 3 children. She was one of those founding members of the Episcopal Church, which was at that time where the Foothill Congregational Church is now. And so she was instrumental in helping build that building and fundraising in order to start that church. She did Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and I think she did a lot of things with Josephine Duveneck. She was just a real pillar of the community. She had a finger in every pie and was just a stalwart. And
that's interesting.
She was one of the first sponsors of the Children's Convalescent Hospital up at Stanford.
At Stanford. And I know he was on the trustee board at Stanford, and she was also involved with the Stanford Convalescent Hospital for Children, correct?
Right, right.
So they were very intimately involved with Stanford.
Yeah. And Hoover.
And Hoover, you know, the Hoover connection, which we might be able to go off on at another time. But let's talk about 500 University,
Okay.
because that's such an important house in our town, and people come from all over to see it. I know that you have people peering over into your dining room windows all the time. But I know, Stevie, that the house is a really has been your family home now for 27 years.
Right.
What are some of the features that make it so unique and so craftsman-like?
Well, I think the most craftsman-like room probably is the dining room, because has so many built-ins, and the craftsman homes did have a lot of built-ins. It has a buffet built in, china cabinets, a built-in window seat, and then it has paneling. The whole room is paneled, and there are ceiling beams. And
Leaded glass.
And on the china cabinets is leaded glass in a pattern that is repeated on one of the sliding doors in another part of the house.
And these are all original to the house,
All
and
original,
nothing has been handed.
Nothing. Well, we did have a major earthquake.
We
and
did, didn't we?
A lot of damage.
In 1989.
1989, but in the dining room, the fireplace did fall in, and we had bricks on the floor. And so the fireplace has been rebuilt, but everything else in the dining room is still original.
Oh, that's really makes it
So-
beloved, I think,
Right,
you know, in terms
right.
of, you know, not having much change.
Right.
So I understand that there've been some remodels. You know, you've done
We've done, well, of course, in the '89 earthquake, but
the major one. Yeah.
maybe John want to tell you about the
Yeah.
ones we think that the
Okay.
shops did.
Well, the house was built in 1910,
Yeah.
but we believe there were two remodels by the Shoups, probably in about 1924 and again in 1932. We're not sure what was done when, but we do know that in those two remodels, the house originally had a very large south-facing porch that went around the lower part, or the south part of the house. And in one of those remodels, that porch was enclosed and brought into the house, so that we have it extended the living room and extended the library. And also, we think there were a number of other bathrooms and kitchens and things like that were remodeled in the course of that time period.
And then you remodeled it once in 19...
Well, we remodeled the kitchen in the 80s,
In 80.
but then the major
remodel.
was in 89, well, in 90, when we updated. Once we tore it apart, the earthquake tore it apart, and we put it back together. So we brought it up to code and did the plumbing and electrical and new shear walls and that sort of thing. And then we really
all that stuff that doesn't show but costs
doesn't
lots of money,
show,
right?
Costs lots of money, right?
That's
But
right.
makes us feel secure.
Right. Well, Stevie and John have been so kind to invite us to come into their home, and we're going to be actually visiting them this Saturday and having them show us firsthand what some of those features of their home look like. So we'll probably at that same time be talking a little bit more about Wolf and Mackenzie, the architects of the home, and get a little bit of flavor for 500 University. So let's roll that tape now. We're here on a beautiful Saturday morning with Stevie and John. We didn't get to talk very much, John, in the studio about Wolf and Mackenzie. What can you tell us about them?
Well, Wolf and Mackenzie formed a partnership, an architectural partnership, right around the turn of the century, and they built homes in the San Jose, Gilroy area for about 11 or 12 years. Among their houses are actually 4 that are listed on the National Registry, including the Griffin House.
They did
the old City Hall in Gilroy, and a number of other structures. They were operating in the craftsman style, which was very popular at that time, very similar to the green and green activity down in Pasadena. In this particular house, which was done in the last year of their partnership, that is 1910, you'll see a number of features that are characteristic of their work. They built several hundred houses in the area, but you'll notice, first of all, the overhanging roof with the rhythm of the large, heavy structures to support it. You'll notice the curved roof line, which has this sort of Japanese tilt rise on the end. You'll also notice the architectural glass, which has this very sharp peak, which is an architectural feature that's repeated in a number of different ways on the facade. The house was modified in 1924 or 32, and a porch that wrapped around the southern exposure of the house was incorporated into the living room and the library.
Family room.
You'll see it extending out to the left of the house end.
Good. So let's go inside now and see some of those other craftsman's features that have been incorporated into the home. So let's go. Now, Stevie, I know this dining room has been painted and you've redecorated, but this is primarily the same room that it was in 1910, and it is definitely a craftsman room. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
I think craftsman, the term, comes from the fact that the people who built these houses were true craftsmen in that they did the woodwork. They took great pride in their craft. And I think you can see a lot of that in this room, starting with all the built-in wall at the end of the room, which has china cabinets and a buffet. And a lot of detail in the woodwork in the drawers and everything. The paneling throughout the room is all hand done.
And very craftsman-like.
And very craftsman and very rectangular. The beams, you find beams in practically all craftsman houses. And then the window seat behind us is a very craftsman-esque detail. The thing that is kind of unusual about this house is the curves that the architect designer has chosen to put in. The curve above the buffet, the curves, the columns, and the corner of the molding around the doors is curved. Most doors in craftsman houses have a squared off corner. So the curve is very unusual. The only thing that has really been changed in this room is the fireplace. And it was damaged in the Loma Prieta quake. So in 1989, we had bricks falling down the chimney and all out into the middle of the floor here. So the fireplace has been redesigned and repositioned. It's smaller than the original one. And the paneling around the fireplace is new, but matches the old.
So these lighting fixtures are...
and the lighting fixtures, again, the craftsman's squared off look. These are brass lighting fixtures that are like the ones that were here.
Replicas.
These are replicas. The old ones were absolutely exactly the same, but to have them repolished and everything was more expensive than putting in new ones. So we went the new route on that.
I think we're going to go outside now, Stevie, and we have a special treat in store. So let's do that now.
Okay.
We're here in the backyard of Stevie and John's beautiful home here on University. And I'd like you to meet Fumiko Kagawa Lee. Fumiko was born on this property. Your father was the caretaker, correct?
That's right, uh-huh.
And they lived here for...
My father lived here for 30 years, my father and mother, and I lived here for 20 years.
So you must have a lot of memories, Fumiko.
Yes, I do. I have a lot of wonderful childhood memory of the creek and the playground and the tennis court and the beautiful garden.
And I think you have a picture to share with us today.
Yes, I do.
About what this property actually looked like. Do you have the picture?
Yes,
I know we're going to put this up on the monitor later, but this is, what can you tell us about this picture?
This is a Japanese garden my father built. It's a beautiful garden with koi fishes in it, and water lilies and waterfall. It was just beautiful Japanese garden. Everybody that came here just admired this garden.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And I know you told me that you and your brothers like to play in Adobe Creek,
Yeah,
correct?
that's why we used to play in the creek and run around in the creek. And my father built a windmill in the creek.
A windmill?
Yeah, a windmill. I think I have a picture of that too. And we really enjoyed it here.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I know this has been kind of a walk down memory lane for you, and you haven't been back here for quite a long time, have you, Fumiko?
That's right. This is the first time I'm back here since I came back. And well,
How many years?
It's been over 50 years now.
Oh, that's marvelous.
That's a long time.
Well, we feel very fortunate to have been the facilitator in introducing you to John and Stevie Day, and I hope that you've enjoyed your visit here to 500 University. We certainly have enjoyed meeting you.
Yes.
So that's about all we have time for today. We've enjoyed our visit here with John and Stevie and Fumiko Lee. Please join us next time, and thank you for watching the Los Altos History Show. See you next time.